Good afternoon. Every fall here at our church, our leadership board prepares a budget. At least that's what we call it, but it's not really a budget. As any accountant can tell you, a budget is a balance of expected income and expected expenses. But that's not what we have at our church because we really have no way of knowing what money is going to come in the next year. What we call a budget is actually a document of a three-way trust. The session trusts that the church will work together to meet the expenses that are coming up. Secondly, the congregation trusts that the session will act carefully and thoughtfully as it spends the money. And third, most important of all, we all trust that God will provide opportunities for us to meet these expenses and that He will show us how we can serve Him through the way that we spend this money. This is one example of a covenant, which is the seventh of the core beliefs of us Presbyterians, that the church is a covenant community. Covenant is a special word to describe a relationship. If you take words like trust and contract and agreement and bond and love and kind of wrap them all together, that describes our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. Covenant happens first because God calls us. He decides that He wants us to have a relationship with Him. We've talked about that already, if you recall, when we talked about election and predestination. God chooses from His grace to create a covenant with us, and He draws us to Him. He prepares a place for us in His home, at His table. But then something funny happens next. As we come into God's house, as we find our place at God's table, we meet other people there. Our relationship with God gives us relationships with other people. And they're not just relationships, they are covenants. That's what it means to be a church, to share a covenant with one another. Now, it's important to remember that the church is a covenant. It's not a covenant that we've created. It is a covenant that God has formed. Just as God is the one who said, "I chose you to be my child before I even created the world," He is also the God who says, "I am bringing all of you together to be a church." And so God brings us together according to His plan. We don't just happen to randomly fall into a church. We're there because God has led us to be there. And once we're together, we discover that we have all of the gifts and abilities and talents that we need to be a healthy, thriving, powerful church. Each person in the church is different, but we're all working for the same common good. See, God knows what He's doing. When He draws us together to be this covenant community that we call a church, He supplies everything that we need. And it can be amazing to see how it happens. Every person in the church has something wonderful and something unique to offer that no one else can do. As 1 Corinthians chapter 12 puts it, there are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in everyone, it is the same God at work. And when we follow along with this, no one is overwhelmed by what they have to do. No one is feeling burdened by what they have to do with the church, because we are all doing what we enjoy doing, what we were created to do. We're all using the gifts that God has given to us. Now, this is how we Presbyterians understand what a church is. Other Christian traditions may look at the church differently. They might consider the church to be a voluntary association. Someone says, "I'm here because I choose to be here in this church. It is my decision to be in a church. And if it's my decision to be part of a church, then I can leave that church whenever I feel like it." In my opinion, this is a much less secure version of what a Christian community is all about. Because at any point, people can get fed up and they can leave. And if you're only part of the church because you decided to be, then you never really know if you're the church that you're supposed to be part of. See, things are different in our Presbyterian tradition. Yes, it may look to us as though we are making a choice to join the church, but God is behind that choice. And because God is the one who has led us into a church, we need to respect the fact that we are a church together. Doesn't always mean it's easy. We Presbyterians have always had a knack for disagreeing with each other, and disagreeing pretty strongly. But the fact remains that because God has brought us together, we still belong to each other. We might not like everyone that we meet in the church, but God has created the covenant relationship that we share with each other. God has brought us together. And so it's up to us as a church to get along and to work together for God's glory. Would you pray with me, please? Lord, thank you for the gift of the church. The fact that we don't have to try to figure out how to follow you and love you and serve you all by ourselves. Thank you for the sisters and brothers that we have in our congregation and, in fact, in the church around the world. Help us, Lord, to discover our particular role and place in this community, and show us how we can work together with each other, how we can honor the covenant that you have created, so that we may live as a church in service to you and to the glory of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk again later.